tayo mga mommies ngayon nowadays, gusto natin talagang masiguro na tama yung gatas na ibigay natin sa mga anak natin. Dahil we all know, sa panahon ngayon, gusto natin healthy ang gut. Kasi tama si Dr. Jen, nagsisimula ang sakit kapag weak.
Nagsisimula ng maging independent? Oops! Support lang!
Give New Nido 3 Plus. Mas pinahusay ng Nutritox.
Siksik sa nutrients for digestion, brain, at protection. Expertly made for toddlers.
Choose Nido 3 Plus.
Wala na. Wala munang mga food court at fiesta. Meron namang lutong bahay. Wala munang window shopping. Meron namang free shipping. Wala na munang bakasyunan. Okay lang siguro mawala lahat ng yon. Huwag lang ito.
And access Vivals, a library near the Vivals at the
developing higher order thinking skills to our elementary students. So this afternoon, I will walk you through with different activities and different tasks that will greatly help you as you develop higher order thinking skills to our students. So allow me to share my screen. so that it would be very easy for you to digest what we'll be talking about this afternoon. So again, I'm Sir Paul. I am currently connected from Colegio San Agustin Bacolod as a senior high school teacher and a College of Education instructor. So I will be sharing with you my thoughts and researches on developing higher order thinking skills. So if you try to take a look of my title, it's learning to think and thinking to learn. Of course, if we try to go back to the principle that as a human person, we are a thinking being. So we are trained on how to think, and as early as elementary students, we need to train our kids on how to think. So let's try to begin with on this premise. Excuse me for a while. There. So learning to think and thinking to learn. So I hope everyone is okay. I hope everyone is well now. And then there are some places, of course, like Cebu, for example, that they are still in ECQ. For example, National Capital Region who is in GCQ. But also here where I am in Bacolod City, we are in a modified general community quarantine. I hope everyone is safe. Allow me to begin that because of this pandemic, because of this COVID-19, the world will never be the same again. That it gave us a lot of challenges, and in just a snap, everything changed. Like, for example, one of the greatly affected institution of the society is educational institutions. That are many things that we want to do that we can't do now. That there are a lot of things that we do before inside our classroom or as a teacher that we can't do now. And also, let us accept the fact, my dear friends, my dear teachers, that how basic education or how higher education will look like will never be the same as before. That because of this pandemic, it brought us a lot of changes, a lot of challenges. But if we try to go back to why and how this happened, of course, let us think not only on the negative side, but also it's good that we need to think also the positive side of this pandemic. That this pandemic will brought us or will bring us to a new normal. But I suggest and I propose that it's not only all about a new normal, that this pandemic maybe will bring us to a better normal. Because this pandemic asked us to reframe, to rethink, to repurpose many things that what we are doing before that might no longer be applicable now. And what might be applicable now might be an innovation, might be a new term or a new endeavor for all of us, but it might be relevant and it might be appropriate to our learners now. Also, let us accept the fact that we are now living in a VUCA ecosystem. That in this VUCA ecosystem, it is characterized by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Volatility means that we are living in an era that the environment demands you to react quickly to ongoing changes that are unpredictable and out of your control. That's why we are all in a rush of establishing COVID or disruption proof or disruptive proof education in each of our schools, that no matter what will happen later on, we could still provide and we could still continue in delivering learning to our students, to our learners. And that is volatility. That we need to establish a disruptive proof education now in order for us to continue, in order for our school to keep afloat. That's why it's so sad to listen and it's so sad to read news that there are a lot of schools that was closed temporarily or momentarily because of this pandemic. And it pierces my heart that it's not only all about the school maybe, but also it's all about the teachers as well as the students who will be displaced if they are enrolled in that school for how many years. As well as we are in an ecosystem that everything is uncertain, that the environment requires you to take action without certainty. Of course, let us accept the fact that we are in an educational scenario that we do not know how to do. We do not know what to do, because we are not used and we are not trained in this ecosystem, in this scenario. But we need to act in order for us to continue. That's why learning agility is one of the skills that this pandemic taught us. That we need to be agile learners, that we need to to listen, we need to react, we need to understand, and we need to take action as fast as we could in order for us to continue. As well as it's complex. Of course, it is characterized by complexity. That this environment is dynamic with many interdependency. Like for example, you do not know how this COVID-19 can be transmitted, that there is no still hard science on how this COVID-19 is transmitted. So that is so complex that many of us are working from home, that many of us are in school, but how the school or how we work in school changed a lot, given that we need to impose social distancing and health protocols to schools, as well as ambiguity. That it is an environment that is unfamiliar, outside of your expertise. Like for example, the teachers now will be making learning modules, for example, or the teachers now will be into online classes. That these are the things that they are not used to and that they are not doing before, that they are now compelled to do, that they don't have a choice but to divert their focus on these things in order for them to continue delivering learning to their clientele. That's why teachers now are challenged to upskill, to reskill, and to cross-skill. One of it is cross-skilling. When we talk about cross-skilling, that there are skills that for you before, if your mindset before, that these skills are only for the IT professionals, the information technology professionals, but now you don't have any choice but also to learn the skills of IT in order for you to develop and in order for you to deliver brilliant education and innovative education. If for you video editing are only a work of IT, if for you the making of PowerPoint presentations are only for the young teachers, but now you don't have any choice but to cross-skill in order for you to continue delivering education. That's why there are some teachers who are already at the twilight of age, or teachers who are already on 50s maybe, or near retirement, and they're telling me, sir, it's very difficult. It's so very difficult. Parang hindi na namin kaya, sir. But and then ganito pa yung nangyari. Nahihirapan talaga kami. But then again, it's good to rethink also. It's good to go back of our primary purpose and mission as teachers. And we cling and we hold on to that. Why did I become a teacher? Why did I become a teacher? Diba? So VUCA ecosystem, we need to embrace this ecosystem in order for us to be happy. Kasi sometimes if you continue to insist on things that you can't do, and then you want to do it, but the situation will not permit you, it might be frustrating. It's more of negative on your part. It's more of that you will feel sad. But then again, let's enjoy the ride. Given that we are in this scenario, we don't have any choice. It's good to explore things already on what can we do. This continuity in school gave us a lot of challenges that you try to imagine, and then the moment that you enter your school and then the classroom, which is full of laughter, full of students before, but now it's empty. No students. And then you will be teaching there. For example, comes this academic year, and then you will be talking on screen, you will be talking on your laptops, and then you will take a look of the classroom that there's chairs, but no students are sitting there. So it pierces our hearts as teachers, this continuity in schooling. But also, let us remember that according to researchers and according to experts, that maybe this is not the last major outbreak we're ever going to see. That there would be more outbreaks later on. That this is not the last pandemic that we will be experiencing. That's why we are into rewiring of education and not only of rebooting education. Because if you will reboot, you will just sleep, and then the moment that you wake up, it's still the same. On the other hand, rewiring education means that you continue to explore some things and some aspects of education that would help you to develop a disruptive-proof education. That no matter what will happen later on, you can still deliver education. Because, for example, if you are a low-risk area now, you can't be sure that you can be into medium risk and high risk area later on. That given that there is no vaccine still, it would be very difficult for us. It would be very difficult for us. J. Prospero de Vera III, the chairman of the Commission on Higher Education, mentioned last time that the approach to education should be anchored on the premise that learning must continue, no matter what will happen. And quarantine or not, learning must continue, and therefore it is everybody's responsibility to ensure that flexible learning is delivered. That the approach of education now is into flexible learning. That we deliver during and after crisis. So higher education, or also it holds true with basic education, that we are repositories of innovation and the vanguards of change. That in times like this, teachers need to be innovative and need to be creative in terms of delivering education, in terms of delivering learning, that we explore many things now in order for us to continue. And we explore creative ways now before or on how can we continue. That's why, for example, we will explore on how critical thinking now can be taught or can be integrated in terms of our self-learning modules. Allow me to continue. Allow me to continue that we just need to know the best modality. According to Edison Fermin, 2020, that there are three types. Either you could be into residential learning, blended learning, hybrid learning, and open or distance learning. If you are into residential learning, there is more face-to-face provision, but the remote provisions are less. On the other hand, if you opt into open or distance learning, the face-to-face provisions are rare to none and remote provisions are more. But of course, we cling to the concept, or we cling still to the possibility that we can have face-to-face provision through hybrid or blended learning later on. That face-to-face provisions could be limited and remote provisions could more. That's why blended learning is flexible. Let's make learning truly flexible. That's why we need to rethink and to repurpose our curriculum maps if you are into basic education, and we need to repurpose and to rethink our syllabi in as we continue in delivering education this August. That's why you need to think about your objectives, your content, and your experience now. That objectives need to be easy to monitor and measure, given that you are no longer there in front of them, that as teachers, you don't have already 100% control with our students. So therefore, you need to see to it that objectives of learning or learning objectives is now easy to monitor and easy to measure. On the other hand, at the level of content, we need to have content that is not complicated, but a content that is an inch long. Inch long means that it's simple, straightforward, basic, essential content, but even though it's simple, even though it's essential, it's a mile deep. That these content would greatly help the students as they progress at the different grade levels, or content that would prepare them in the world of work, as well as experience that tap into learner schema and promote choice. Also, we need to think about that education is for all. That's why we need to think about equitable access to education. That we offer not only online learning, but also we provide opportunities for students who can't access. That from the very beginning, we already talk about, or we already survey the percentage of our students who can go online and who can go offline. As well as we will choose learning management systems that it do have a capacity for offline. The moment that the internet connection was erratic, or the internet connection was interrupted, given that we are in a place, or given we are in a country that internet connection is still unstable. That's why we explored self-learning modules now. We explored non-wired learning options now in the delivery of education. But also, we need to think about also on how to do it. That at the level of the ladder, or in a ladder, we are still on the level of how do I do it? And we are here. Not only you, me, and most of us are there. That we are at the level of how do I do it? That we are into delivering education in a module But a module could either be an online module or a printed module. But how to be engaging, how to be engaging, how to instill critical thinking in a learning module, we are still here. How do I do it? Also, it has a lot of questions also at the level of our students, at the level of our parents. That one of the biggest problem now of private schools is low enrollment. That many of our parents and many of our schools do not yet, or many of our schools or many of our clienteles don't yet enroll simply because that they are not assured on how they will do it or how will learning will happen. Let's try to take a look first on the shifts in mindset that we have shifted from in-person to remote learning scenario, from a face-to-face instruction or a residential instruction in school into a home-based or remote learning. Also, we've shifted from sessions to modules. If before, classes are divided into different sessions, now classes are divided in terms of the modules, as well as the class hours before are now divided into the different learning time. That it is no longer teacher-centered, but more of learner-centered now, as well as teacher-centered and learner-centered. So we need to shift our mindset that what we are doing before, we can't do it now. That also we can't go back to what we are doing before, or it might be difficult for us to replicate what we are doing in a face-to-face scenario to the remote learning scenario. So you can't have online classes from 7 o'clock until 4 o'clock. You can't do it. Why you can't do it? You also consider the screen time limit of our students, that they can't do it. They can't do it. Like for example, if 6 years old and below, 1 hour is the maximum screen time limit of our kids. For 6 years old and above, you can have 2 hours of maximum screen time limit in consonance with the American Pediatric Association. Also, we need to be experience driven. That we need to design also self-learning modules or online learning modules that is experience-driven, hinging from the idea of Dr. Edison Fermin that we need to be experience-driven and not content-driven, that we need to be content-sensitive and not content-dependent, that we ask our students to search for content, that what are my must-knows and need-to-knows, and they employ search tools. How will you look for the information you need as well as you use transform knowledge under which certain conditions will? That we are in a scenario or we are in a situation that information are too ubiquitous, that students now can access information anywhere. Therefore, you need also to rethink and to repurpose the self-learning modules that you are making. That gone are the days that the role of a teacher is a mere dispenser of knowledge. The role of the teacher now is a coach, a facilitator, and a designer of learning experience. That's why in the design of self-learning modules, you remember Kolb on his experiential learning theory, that you let the students experience, and later on the students will make an hypothesis of what the content is. So you focus on experience. Do not design self-learning modules or online learning modules that will only ask the students to read, to answer, to read, to answer. If that is the case, it will make a burden or it will be boring to our learners. What matters most now? Less of lower order thinking, more of higher order thinking. What matters most now is less of supplying a response, but more of constructing a response. What matters most now? You focus on product, but less of focus on product rather, but more of focus on process. Less of breadth, but more of depth. Let's also accept the fact that we are we are used to teaching that we try to read or we try to focus on the textbook from cover to cover. That in order for you to become an effective and efficient teacher, you can finish the book from cover to cover. But this time, we are not into that. That we focus not on breadth, but on the depth of our the learning of our learners. So you focus on competencies. We have the most essential learning competencies of the Department of Education. That according to Tony Wagner, what matters most today is not how much our students know, that it's not all about the quantity, but what they can do with what they know. Also, we need to link our content with our assessment. That in accordance with the McTighe and Wiggins Understanding by Design framework in the year 2012, that we focus on the big ideas and core tasks, important to know and do, worth being familiar with. That we focus into performance tasks and projects, which are complex, open-ended, and authentic. Also, we need to shift from keeping questions secret, that before we keep questions secret, to make sure that students know what will be assessed. But now, we need to shift to a mentality or to a mindset that student engagement for Gen Z, work that is worth, challenging, and supported. Worth, challenging, and supported. Let's try to talk about prior COVID-19. Our focus is into knowledge, attitude, and skills. Knowledge, skills, and attitude. If before the old 3 R's are focused into reading, writing, and arithmetic, the new 3 R's now has shifted into reasoning, into resiliency, and responsibility. That we teach now not all about knowledge, that we teach now not only skills, that we teach now not only attitude, but we teach now for reasoning, for resiliency, and for responsibility. If before our mere goal is the students can read, can write, and can count the moment that they leave the portals of your school, now it is also a goal that it has shifted into individuals or learners leaving the portals of your school who are resilient, responsible, and possesses good reasoning skills. I would like to focus on reasoning in this afternoon session with you. That I would like to focus on reasoning in this afternoon session with you. The K-12 curriculum is enriched. I would like to highlight inquiry-based approaches and constructivist approaches as the theoretical framework of the K-12 curriculum, of the enhanced basic education curriculum of the Department of Education that we are using now. As well as, why do we need to teach critical thinking? Of course, it's one of the 21st century skills as stipulated by P21, or the Partnership for 21st Century Learning framework of the 21st century skills. That we have life and career skills, learning and innovation skills, information, media, and technology skills. I would like to focus on learning and innovation skills that we are asked to develop to our students 4 C's. And what are those 4 C's? Critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. Of course, critical thinking is there. Critical thinking is there. That we develop critical thinking to our students. Allow me to focus on that. Natural logic equals common sense. The ability to reason is innate to human beings. We have the gift of common sense, which St. Thomas Aquinas defined as the habit of the first principles. And that's common sense. That all of us do have common sense. But the problem is, you will be telling me, sir, why there's a lot still who don't have common sense? The answer is this. Common sense is like deodorant. The people who need it most never use it. And that's sad. That's sad. And it is where our vocation and our mission as teachers will come in developing common sense as early as the elementary grades. It is uncommon for people to say, I thought it was no big deal. I'm so sad. I thought it's not big deal for you. I'm so sorry. I thought I just wasn't thinking. Meron bang taong ganyan na I thought hindi ako nag-iisip? Or kasi hindi ko siya napag-isipan, pasensya na. Pwede bang balikan natin yun? Minsan may mga bagay na hindi mo na pwedeng balikan. As well as, how was I supposed to know? Ano ba talaga? Paano ko talaga siyang malaman yan? And I can't think of everything. Hindi ko talaga malaman yung lahat. Meron mga taong ganyan. But if we try to go back to the adage of René Descartes, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. That you are a thinking being, that you live because you think, that as a human person, you are gifted by the divine with two faculties, and that is intellect and will. Intellect is the faculty of a human person to think, to act, to reason out, and that is unique to a human person. That only a human person was gifted by the intellect faculty, by the divine. On the other hand, will is the faculty of the human person to do something. To do something. Allow me to continue on that premise. Let's try to define higher order thinking according to Susan M. Brookhart. In the year 2010, in the book she published with Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development entitled Assessing Higher Order Thinking Skills. According to Susan M. Brookhart, that higher order thinking can be defined in three aspects: at the level of transfer, at the level of critical thinking, and at the level of problem solving. At the level of transfer, higher order thinking is being manifested by our students who not only remember, but also to make sense of and be able to use what they have learned. That the moment that they used what they have learned, it is considered as a higher order thinking at the level of transfer. On the other hand, higher order thinking also can be defined at the level of critical thinking, that it requires students to think in a reasonable and reflective way of thinking that is focused on what to believe or do. Focus on reasonable and reflective way. And that is our convention, or that is the definition, the common definition of critical thinking or of higher order thinking for us. That higher order thinking is equated with critical thinking. On the other hand, most of the time, we know that we develop higher order thinking the moment that we introduce problem solving. That problem solving requires students to learn with understanding, critically evaluate ideas, formulate creative alternatives, and communicate effectively. That you pose as problem, you pose a situation that the process is not yet determined, and you will ask the students to provide a process on how to solve it. So that is where higher order thinking will come in. So therefore, according to Brookhart, that higher order thinking is not only all about critical thinking, it's also all about transfer and problem solving. Let's try to talk about it. What are the effects of assessing thinking skills? It increases student achievement. According to TIMSS, the Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study, it reported that in mathematics and science, instruction emphasizing reasoning was associated with higher scores in all grade levels tested. Secondly, it increases student motivation. That students do not become engaged with their studies in the abstract, nor do they become motivated in the abstract. That they can think, they can learn at the level of abstract. Rather, they become engaged in thinking about particular things and motivated to learn particular things. Thinking is much more fun than in memorizing. That the moment that the students memorize a lot, it doesn't mean or it doesn't show that the students possesses higher order thinking skills. It's wrong. It's a wrong concept of higher order thinking skills. On the other hand, on how to design modules that promotes critical thinking or higher order thinking skills, we need to ask this question. How might we create opportunities for learners to think about the meaning of what has been learned and make connections to other knowledge and experiences? What have I learned? How I learned it? And why are we learning this? Allow me to share with you some principles of assessing higher order thinking skills. The first principle is you use introductory material. Allow students to use resource materials and give students something to think about it. That in the making of your self-learning modules, do not give immediately a question. Then ask the students to answer the question. That format, that technique, that approach might no longer be applicable to our students now. Give them an introductory material and you develop and you pattern the question based from the introductory material that you've presented. Like for example, if you are into a printed module, you ask the students or you give a student a meme, a picture. And from that picture, you ask open-ended questions and elicit a response or a discussion to our students. And in that way, you use introductory material for your higher order thinking skill open-ended question. On the other hand, if you are into online learning module, you try to look for a music video, for example, a YouTube video, and from there, you ask question from the video and be able to relate that on your learning objectives. So it's a wrong approach of assessing higher order thinking skills that you immediately pose a question without an introductory material. The second principle, of course, is you use novel material, a new material. Novel material refers to material that students have not worked with already as part of the classroom instruction. Also, as the early age of kinder, as the early age of nursery, our students doesn't want of repetitive statements, repetitive dialogues. Diba? Minsan mga sumasabing mga bata na nursery, sinasabihan ako, again? O, kayo din. That's why the moment that you present a material that you repeatedly present it, the students will ask you, again? So use novel material. Remember, these are Gen Z learners. These are Gen Z learners. Next principle, manage cognitive complexity and difficulty separately. The cognitive complexity and difficulty and the level of difficulty are two different things. That the moment that you ask a difficult question, for you is already a higher order thinking skills. You try to develop or you try to take a difference or to strike a difference between cognitive complexity and level of difficulty. That level of difficulty refers to easy versus hard, and level of thinking refers to recall versus higher order thinking. And then you will be posting a question that the students do not know the answer for you. Oh, it's higher order thinking skills. Oh, it's not. Only that you did not give that during the instruction, during your teaching and learning process. So it's not. The questions at the level of recall and the students can't answer can be considered the higher order thinking skills. So you try to strike a difference between the level of difficulty and the level of thinking. Let's try to I would like to share with you strategies on how to develop higher order thinking skills for the elementary grades. Number one, you can use open questions. You can use open questions. Plan 2 or 3 open questions for every lesson. That also, my dear teachers, that in the design of your self-learning modules, you apply also the checkpoint principle. That you give activity, that you give task, but do not forget to continue to the next activity without checking for understanding. And one way of developing higher order thinking skills to our students is to check for understanding and to check if what they have learned for every activity that they've experienced. Also, craft those questions carefully to make sure they tap the particular content and thinking skills you want to teach. That you go back to your competency, you go back to your objectives, what higher order thinking you want to develop. Also, be sure to include follow-up strategies or checkpoint strategies to get students respond to one another instead of just to you. Like for example, in a learning management system, you ask the students for a discussion that they will answer a question based from an introductory material. It's also good to ask them to write a comment to the comments of their classmates in order for them to respond and to think not only of their own responses based from your question, but also to think from other perspectives. You can do that also. Excuse me for a while. Strategy. Example, illustration. Let them exercise reasoning. Example is, who is your hero? And this is for the elementary grades. You talk to a family member about who their heroes are. Think about who some of your heroes are. Research and learn more about your hero. What makes them special? It's one way of developing critical thinking at the level of kindergarten or at the level of primary grades. Second strategy that I want to share. Thinking is not retelling. Thinking, not retelling. A retelling asks students merely to look up and reproduce information. What have we learned yesterday? So it's a mere retelling. Artfully perhaps, but without additional cognitive processing, retelling is not thinking. How to think and not retell? Pose a purposeful question. You pose a purposeful question and ask what if? What else? That's one way of asking the students to think and not only retell. Asking what if and what else will compel students to elaborate on what they're studying, analyze and describe what you're studying. Allow me to give you an example. The power of yet. This is example of an authentic assessment or an assessment that strikes critical thinking, that develops higher order thinking skills to our students. We have to work every day to learn new things and keep trying even when it's hard. Being able to say we don't know how to do something yet is powerful. Complete this sentence. I can't blank yet, but if I blank, I will be able to. Our brains grow so much when we make mistakes and try new things. Try something new or something that is hard to do today. So there's example of what if questions that you can develop to our students. The last strategy is student self-assessment, that you can instill and you can integrate higher order thinking skills to our students through student self-assessment. That students who can self-assess are poised to be lifelong learners. That you teach students to self-assess with a rubric, with a checklist. If it is evident in their line of thinking, you use confident ratings and have students co-create success criteria. At the level of elementary grades, you can use smileys or emoticons, but do not only stop at the level of selection of smiley, but also ask them why they feel that way. Why they feel that way. Allow me to share with you on the last part of my presentation, applications that target higher order thinking skills. I hope you can use this as you integrate higher order thinking skills in your day-to-day or in your learning modules as you design and as you craft your learning modules. Number one, it's also good to have this Mendomo. Mendomo is an application that you can use in asking the students to make a mind or concept map. For example, you will be giving a concept and then you ask them to map it out. So you can use Mendomo for mind or concept mapping. On the other hand, there is also Audio Boom. Audio Boom is a podcast. For example, you want the student to recite something. You want your student to give his or her reflection all about the story that they have read. And then, for example, you are in a vicinity or you are in a locality that there is no, or that the strong bandwidth of internet connection is not feasible. So you can use podcast. So they can audio record with Audio Boom as a form of podcast. Also, you can use Loom as a screencast application. Like for example, you want your students to report something or to give a reaction or to tell or to retell a story, the parent can ask them to have the screencast of it. That screencasting, it doesn't mean that the student need to have a chalkboard or a lot of props at the back. The students or the learners, the elementary grades can have Loom and then they can transfer or upload it in the learning management system of your school. As well as we have this Padlet or an online bulletin board that you will be asking questions and then you will ask the kids to write a response and to design it in an online bulletin board. You can use Padlet as a form of online bulletin board and the students can give his or her reaction there. So you can use that Padlet. Also, we have here Telagami. If you want to engage the kids in a digital story, you can use Telagami. You will design a character, and you can make a story, or you can adapt, or you can animate a story that you know through Telagami. So you can go to www.telagami.com for a digital story. Another If you are into higher grades, maybe grade 4 to grade 6, and then you ask them to read something, and then you want to check if they will read it, to check if they will read it, because sometimes our students will not read if it's into voluminous reading, and they don't want to read that. So how can you do that? You use perusal for active reading, that you will be highlighting some sentences, and along the way, you ask a question, and then there will be conversation along the way. This is good for grade 4 to grade 6, maybe for grade 5 to grade 6, for active reading purposes. To see to it that they are reading the text, and they do not only skim the text. It's one way also to develop higher order thinking skills in every nook of the reading material. As well as if you are into intellectual or public debates and discussions, you can use Kialo. Through Kialo, the teacher can give a premise or a prompt, and then the students will think about what are the pros and cons of that prompt. So Kialo. As well as, of course, if you could use Google Docs for collaborative documents, slides, and sheets. You want the students to think about of something, to share his or her thoughts, but the internet connection, the stability of internet connection will not permit us, you can use Google Docs. Like for example, on my case, I asked my students to give or to explain a slide. I assigned them a slide through Google Docs, and then I asked them to record their voice. So therefore, I can listen to their lecture, I can listen to their report, and they embed their lecture on the specific slide that I assigned to them. So you can use Google Docs. As well as if you are into science and math, and then you want to engage your students through simulations, you can have this fet.colorado.edu, that it can give you a wide array of science and math simulations that you can also ask the students to look into as a form of internet resources, as a form of integration of various internet resources online. Also, of course, let us not forget the V-Smart School of the BAL. That, of course, the V-Smart School boasts of the following features: live stream virtual classes, the self-paced and teacher-paced learning experience for weak internet connection, as well as the complete K-12 digital curriculum, the completed JEC digital curriculum for college. But I would like to focus on virtual interaction between teachers and students through chat discussion. That the V-Smart School do have a feature for chat discussions, that it's not only a chat of anything around the sun, but also a chat or an intellectual discussion that the teachers can have between the teacher and the student, between the material and the student, and between the student to the student. That a good learning management system need to have an interaction with our students. So you please maximize that feature of your learning management system, because a learning management system is like an empty room that it doesn't have yet a furniture. That as a teacher, you will be the one who will design, you will be the one who will arrange the furniture inside the room. So for example, because one of our misconception of a learning management system is that we treat learning management system as a mere repository of our handouts, which is not. Because if you want to have like that lang, so better na Google Drive ka na lang if ganyan lang talaga yung gagawin mo. So I am so sad that if that is the case. But also, learning modules online is a form of learning module, and it needs still to have a process. So there must have an interaction where you can develop higher order thinking skills. So if you are into print-based, on the other hand, VIBAL do have also the augmented reality or the AR, that through the AR, it can increase learner motivation. That if it is abstract to them, if it sounds abstract to them, VIBAL offered augmented reality to make it 3D and to turn that abstract concept into a reality. That through VIBAL textbooks, the integration of natural and digital worlds excites the learners and imbues them with more motivation to study. So that is augmented reality of VIBAL for their textbooks in order for you to develop higher order thinking skills, and it will not only end at the level of abstract concepts. So learning has to focus on reasoning, not subjects. Let's try to remember that, my dear teachers, that we teach not only for content, that we teach not only for the grades now, but we teach for the mastery. Allow me to summarize my sharing with you this afternoon. Number one, that there is no standard model of facilitating critical thinking. Enjoy. You try to take a look of other techniques, of other approaches, and you try to explore the applications that I have presented. Also, number two, that there is diversity in methods and materials is necessary. That in order for you to engage the students, you need to have diverse methods and materials and not repetitive materials and methods that you want to introduce. Number three, also, that perfection is impossible. That in engaging the students to think in a higher order thinking skill, perfection is impossible. As well as learner satisfaction is not the sole aim of critical thinking. And the importance there is into risk taking. So learning has to focus on reasoning, not subjects. So thank you very much, everyone. I hope that there are questions and I'm very happy to answer your questions now.
Yes po, Sir Paul. Thank you very much. Now we'll proceed to the question and answer po. The first question po is from Ma'am Rodenia Ligtas. Good afternoon po, sir. Will the previous grading system be used during this blended distant learning? If not, how will be the students be graded?
As far as I know, the Department of Education is preparing a new policy guidelines on the basic education assessment. But for now, we try to go back to DepEd Order number 8 series of 2015 or 2016, which is the National Policy Guidance on the K-12 Classroom Assessment. But there would be revision. I hope that they are crafting new policy on classroom assessment, which we will wait if when will it come out. So that's the first question.
Thank you po, sir. Next po from Miss Mary Jane Arquiliano. Thank you for the valuable input, Sir Paul. My question is, how would I be able to know that it's really my learners, that my learners are really answering their modules?
To know that it's really my learners. That's one of the disadvantage actually of self-learning modules, of printed self-learning modules. And also, that's why one of the things that you need to do is that to provide check-up points for every activity that you are making. That in every nook of every in every nook of the module, right after the student experience or answered that activity, you provide check-up points. Check-up points could either be a question of 1 or a question of 2 that the students can answer. To see to it that they've experienced the activity, to see to it that they answered the module. But also, there are scenarios that along the way, the students answered only the pre-assessment and the post-assessment. So it's good also that you can have a policy in your school that is incomplete. If incomplete, there is a corresponding sanction, for example, if the students was not able to answer the modules. So thank you, Ma Mary Jane Arquiliano.
Thank you po, sir. Next po from Miss Jonna Magbanwa. Sir, how can you stimulate the students' higher order thinking skills to those who we consider slow learners?
Okay, that's a learning module can answer that, or a learning module can answer that simply because that learning module is designed in a personalized manner. That in a personalized manner, if you've noticed that this student belongs to the slow learner group, so therefore you can lower down your questions or you can suit your questions to the level of your learners. That's one of the good thing of self-learning modules. That self-learning modules is personalized compared to a textbook or compared to a work text that it was created in a generic manner for both the student and the teacher, no matter what level you are in.
Yeah. Next, sir, the last question po is from Ma'am Filomena Peñaflor. Good day po, Sir Paul. Since we are now in the ambiguous word of the environment, how can we develop the students on their new way of thinking based on what is happening nowadays?
It's a good question. Actually, in the design of higher order thinking skills, or in the design of activities that elicit the students to manifest higher order thinking skills, it's good that you need to connect the content to what is happening in a reality now. Like for example, one of my subjects in educational technology and my curriculum development subject, that I asked my students to make a prototype. And then it's not, the prototype is the skill, the target competency. But then I asked them to make a prototype of how COVID or how post-COVID-19 will look like. So make a prototype on how post-COVID-19 restaurant will look like, given that social distancing or physical distancing is still enforced. So how COVID-19 dating will look like. So they will be make a prototype of that. So one way of using the VUCA ecosystem or the reality that we are experiencing now is you can use that, because that is somewhat relevant to our students. Of course, the students will learn what is only relevant to them. You can use that in the design of your learning activities. So you connect the content to the reality. So thank you very much, Ma'am Phenomena, Penya Floor.
And thank you po, sir. That's all our questions we have
Thank
for
you.
now. Any last reminders po for our viewers today po?
Continue to innovate, continue to creative, and let's enjoy the ride, teachers. Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
There we have it. So, in behalf of Ibal Group Incorporated, I would like to thank you, Sir Paul, for your very comprehensive, informative discussion that we have this afternoon. It is an honor to have you with us today. And to all our Kabibal viewers, all thanks to you for your continuous patronage to our daily learning sessions. And once again, thank you so much and see you again tomorrow. Have a nice day. Goodbye po.